Hello everyone, welcome back to the next episode of Dev Drawer. Today we're going to be talking about taking what we did last week and putting it into a pretty interface. Currently you can see the arrays that we were able to do last time, and you can kind of look through using, going up and doing update.php and all this kind of stuff. So what we're going to do this time is actually give you linkable interfaces. We're going to incorporate Bootstrap, we're going to incorporate DataTables, we're going to incorporate FontAwesome, and if you're not aware of any of those things, we're actually going to go through those step by step so you can kind of see what you need to do in order to incorporate those into your project. So first thing we're going to do is I want to browse out to our database real quick just to have it open in the background. And again, we're using root and password as the password. And let's go ahead and no password. So root and no password. And then our database is going to be dev drawer, same as it was last time, with the one table that we have for employees, which you can see right here. So first thing we want to do is go out and grab Bootstrap. So I'm going to come over to here to my code, and we're going to add something in the header up here in order to grab Bootstrap. So if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, Bootstrap is a CSS framework. It was originally created by Twitter internally, and they liked it so much that they released it to the internet for free. So it's a very common CSS framework. There's a lot of them out there, and I'm using this one in particular because a lot of people have used it before. And if you're not familiar with it, it's very easy to get started with, and it incorporates JavaScript, it incorporates CSS, HTML. So there's a lot of really cool things that it can do. So it's not just a CSS framework, it's kind of like an all-in-one framework for front end. And a lot of people use it. The only thing you have to be mindful of is whenever you're creating something with a Bootstrap framework, you will end up looking like every other website out there if you don't modify it and customize it. In this tutorial, we're not going to modify it and customize it. We're going to just use it as is, so you can kind of get the feel of what you're supposed to do in order to get it to work. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to getbootstrap.com. So that's getbootstrap.com. And here, this is where you can download it. So you click on get started, and it gives you the CSS, it gives you the JavaScript that you need, or it gives you a starter template. Since we already have a website that's been started over here, we're not going to use a starter template. We're just going to start adding this CSS and JavaScript into our files. So let's go ahead and copy the CSS and put it in our header. And then we're also going to copy the JavaScript, and we're going to put it into the before the body closing tags. So whenever you get done adding your CSS and JavaScript, you should see something that looks like this. So right now, if we go to save this and refresh our page over here, you can see that it changed a little bit. There's default fonts that are used with it, there's default classes, and right now we are not using any styling on it whatsoever. So what I like to do is wrap everything, wrap all of the content inside of a div class container dash fluid. You can use div class container instead of container fluid if you want to have it where it's set to a specific width. Container fluid just kind of makes it extend all the way out to the edges of the screen and then still give you a little padding. Like right now it's butting up right up against it, but if we refresh the page, now there's padding on each side. If we change this over and do container, it'll actually make it where it's a max size and you'll have a lot of spacing on it. However, whenever you're using bigger monitors, you always want to kind of code for those as well. So we use div class container dash fluid in order to code for those better, and we can control the container a lot more. So if it's something where we got full size images going from left to right, we want to make sure that those are displayed without being inside of a blocked element. Alright, so now we have our Bootstrap set up inside of our website. So I want to take some of this code and I want to remove it, but I want to keep my select all, and I'm going to change this into a function call at the top instead of variable. So all employees equals select all. And if you remember from the last episode, this select all just basically displays what you're seeing in the browser right now, where it just displays an array of everything. And we have it formatted, format code, so we can actually see that array. So it's pulling back an array, and then we're displaying it with format code where it adds a pre-tag at the end and at the beginning before it prints that array. So we want to go ahead and get rid of that because we're going to make this into a much prettier interface using DataTables. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this and save it. So one of the cool things about Bootstrap is that it comes with its own icon set. However, we like to use FontAwesome, and you can find FontAwesome by going to their website, FontAwesome.com, and then they have a how to use section on it. So if you go to their homepage, screen is very small. So let me zoom out a little bit so it gives me more of a wide screen. I have it very small in order to show both of my screens at the same time. But they have this start at the top. You click on start, and then you can come over here to see all the ways that you can use it. The way that they refer you to use it is to click on hosting font yourself, hosting FontAwesome yourself. So what they do is they give you a folder that you can download that contains the CSS, the JavaScript, the LESS, the SCSS, the sprites, SVGs, web fonts. They give you all of it, and then you just create a link, a CSS reference link, and have it point to your folder, and then you can include icons like this. That this would get you a user icon. This would get you the GitHub icon that has a square around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I've already downloaded the FontAwesome for the web. So I'm going to, inside of my folder over here, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it Fonts, and then I'm going to browse out, which you won't be able to see on your screen, but you should be able to see it whenever I populate it over. So if you bear with me just a second, I'm going to copy this and copy it into my fonts folder. So it's currently copying it right now, and you can see that it populated with all of the files that you downloaded, and that way it's just something that we can reference later in our header in order to grab those files. So whenever we are adding a reference to an internal font, you want to, let me put something underneath here, and we're going to add another link, rel equals style sheet, and we're going to make it href equals /fonts, which is the folder that we just created, /css /all.css, and that's basically just going into here, and we got css all.css. You can do the min version of it. You can link to specific brands. There may be some instances where you want to display, a Facebook, Twitter icon, so you might need to include one of this, but the all should cover most of it. You just have to call it differently, which you can see on the browser itself down here. So this one's FAS to do a user, because this is calling the solid.css, so FAS for solid, FAR for regular, FAB for brands, or you can just do FA and it'll give you the generic fonts that are available. If you try to do something and it adds like a square to your browser, you might be able to go in there and change it to FAB if you're trying to add a GitHub square icon. So see FAB, FAS, FAR, FAL. So solid, regular, light, brands. So let's go ahead and get out of our FontAwesome window, and we're going to add something here that incorporates the one of those icons. So for here, let's go ahead and click on our H1 tag, and we want it to be like a circle or a checkbox or something like that. So I'm going to do, inside of my H1 tag, I'm going to do em class equals fa dash check dash circle. And the reason why I'm doing fa circle is because I want to have a checkbox with a circle underneath it, or I'm sorry, inside of a circle. So let's go ahead and save that, and if we go back to our website over here, we now have a checkbox inside of a circle. If we do just the check, it's going to show just the checkbox with no circle around it, which doesn't look as pretty to me as the circle being around it. Okay, so one thing that we're going to have to deal with eventually is we don't want to have to modify every single page every single time we want to add a new style sheet or JavaScript. Like for example, we don't have our own style sheet in here, so we don't want to use this way. The better way to do it that I found is to create a new folder, and we're going to call this theme. You can call it whatever you want to as long as you know how to reference it. And then in this theme folder, we're going to create a new file called header-scripts.php. So this header-scripts.php is going to be called in place of this. So that means we only have to add it one time, and then we can modify it later, and it updates it on every page that it has this include function that we're fixing to add on it. So we're going to go right here, and we're going to do PHP include, close that out, and then we're going to do theme slash header dash scripts.php. Now if we go back to our page over here and refresh it, you can see that it still works. That's because it's essentially printing out what we have here inside of our header the same way we had it. So we also want to do the same thing with our footer scripts. And again, you don't have to do it this way. This is just an easier way for you to keep track of it. If you're using WordPress or you're using a framework for PHP, you wouldn't necessarily do it this way. Either you would do it inside of your functions.php file if you're using WordPress, or you would do it in one of the core files if you're using something like Laravel. But for this purpose, we're going to include our own footer and header scripts. And if you're wondering why I put the JavaScript at the bottom and the CSS at the top, is because JavaScript, you don't want to hold up the processing of your website by waiting on your JavaScript to load. So CSS is pretty important whenever you go to load the page. I try to keep my primary CSS at the top of the site. That way, even if there's a little bit of a load time, maybe like a half a millisecond or something like that, it won't be too detrimental. If you're trying to load the entire Bootstrap JavaScript library on load of your page, it could make it where your users are sitting there for a few seconds waiting for those elements to appear. Usually you can get away with it by having your jQuery and Bootstrap and anything else in the footer, because you want to load your content first. That way that they can see it, and then there may be a millisecond where it switches over to actually display your CSS and your JavaScript properly. But for this purpose, we don't really have to worry about it because it's a very small website, nothing that it's really doing. Just kind of FYI as to why I did it that way. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is we want to include our footer scripts in the same place that we actually had the scripts, and we're going to change this to footer. And now I'll show you why we did it this way. So with this one folder, this one file, we can go to like our update page and include it here, and then go down to the bottom right before the body tag and include our footer down here. Now whenever we go to modify this, or we go to modify this, it'll be updated on the update.php page as well as the index.php page. Okay, so we'll go through and do the rest of the pages just like that in a little bit, but there's another script that I want to show you that I think most people, some people may not be aware of it, but if you are a developer, you've probably seen it if you've ever had to display data, and they're DataTables.net. And whenever you go there, we want to create a table that looks like this. You can use Bootstrap's table, but I like this because you can filter, you can show all of the entries, you can filter it down and up, you can search for it. So if we search for New York, it automatically filters out the things that are not New York. So just kind of an example of what you can do, and I've seen people that use Bootstrap to do it. There's a lot of ways to do it. None of them are especially the wrong way or the right way, but this is one of the coolest ways that I found to do it that's very simple. So we're going to go ahead and load in our CSS. So we're going to go to our header scripts, and we're going to create another link rel equals style sheet with an href of the link that we just copied from their website. And then we're also going to include our JS the same way that we did here. So I'm going to copy over one of these scripts, move it over, and we're going to call this. Best practices would be to download these two files for production use, because you don't want to be relying on someone else's structure with their file system. You want to make sure that you have the copy of these files that you're using, just to make sure that if their site ever goes down, it doesn't bring down the scripting or the CSS for your website. Plus, it also removes some of the load time that their website has. Right now, it's going through a CDN, which is kind of negligible for what we're doing, but if you don't want to use their resources when you could be using yours. Alright, so next I want to create a new file in the parent, and I'm going to call this init for initialize.js, and inside of my initialize.js I'm going to copy over this script. So it's a jQuery script where it's looking to see if the document is ready. Once it's ready, it's going to take whatever table we create, and it's going to add the data table interface, which should make it show like this. So we need to save this, and we're going to add a reference to that script in our footer-scripts. So we're going to do /js/initialize.js. And the reason I'm doing a slash right here is because if you right now they're all on the primary domain, so it's going to be /delete, /create, /update. But you could have something like update / the number of the employee that you're updating. And if you don't have the slash in here, it's going to be looking for a /update/js. So this right here just basically tells it to default back to the primary domain where our current JS is stored. Actually, it's not even inside of a folder. So I would normally create that inside of a folder, but I'm not going to right now. It's already initialized. So I'm just going to leave it as it is here. And if we go back to our page over here, and we go to inspect the elements, you can see inside of our header, or our head, we have the links to all of the files that we just added. And then if you look inside of our body, you can see that we also have all of the links that we added for our scripts. Alright, so let's go ahead and close out of this for now. And we're going to take all of the data that we were displaying in an array in the first episode, and we're going to actually display it inside of a table. So let's go back to let's go ahead and close out of this, and this, because we don't need any of these right now. Okay, so inside of this container fluid, we're going to add a table. So let's do table class equals table, which is a Bootstrap class that'll format the table properly. And then we're also going to call this data table. That way, and we have it on our JavaScript to list it as a ID. So we're not going to worry about that right now, because if we wanted to display multiple tables on one page, we couldn't use an ID because then it would break the JavaScript. So we're going to do it as a class so we can display multiple tables if we wanted to. We won't for this tutorial, but maybe in the future we will. So let's go ahead and close out our table. And then we're going to add a t-head. If you're not familiar with t-heads, that is basically the header rows of your table. And this DataTables.net script requires a t-head in order for it to be able to display the paging, as well as the sort functionality. So we're going to be referencing our database here. So we got ID, fname, lname, and phone. So let's go ahead and create, so tr and then th instead of td. Td is inside of the body, th is inside of the head. So th ID, let's close that out, and let's go ahead and copy this down. So we're going to do ID, first name, last name, phone, and then we're also going to have a blank one here that we're going to have our actions on. So let's go ahead and rename these. Alright, so now let's close out our row and we close out our head. And now we start our t-body, which is where the data will go. So inside of our T-body, we're going to do a for each loop that loops through all of our array items and displays them in a table. So I'm going to go ahead and close out our T-body, so that way that we can start working on the PHP part of it. Alright, so let's do our first PHP tag. We're going to open it up, and we're going to do a for each, and we're going to use this variable that we declared up here for our array. And we're going to do for each the array as an employee. So that way we're taking each row in this array and we're creating a variable that we can reference to be able to display what's inside of that row. Alright, so we got our for each tag. Let's go ahead and close out, go end for each, and then we're going to come in here and we're going to echo out a row. So we're going to have to echo out, let me go ahead and try to format this so y'all can see it better. So tr, which is the row, and then td, which is the inside of the row. Then we're going to close out our row. So let's go ahead and do our ID first. So we declared it as the single row as employee, and then we're going to grab that ID from the array. Alright, so let's go ahead and copy this, and we're going to make first name, last name, phone, and then for here we're just going to have it blank for right now. So we're going to do ID first. No, we called it F name, I believe. And then we're going to do L name. Then we're also going to do phone. So for right now, we should be able to close that out. We should be able to have a table that displays whatever's coming through in that array. So let's switch back to our home page. We're going to do a quick refresh, and now we have it all displayed in a table, which looks very nice. It doesn't appear that it's using the JavaScript. Oh, that's because we need to take our class that we called it, open up our initialize.js, and change it from ID or hashtag mytable to .datatable. Now if we refresh, so footer scripts, initialize.js, let's see if there's any errors that are pulling over. So we open up the console, there's nothing pulling over right now, so maybe a hard refresh. There we go. Hard refresh did the trick. So let's say we wanted to filter this by John, it'll show just John. We want to filter by Jane, it'll show just Jane, or we filter nothing and it'll show everything. And you can see the paging or the down and up sort arrows. So you can come over here and sort these however you want. Alright, so now we have our table. So this is primarily what DataTables is going to do for you. It's pretty simple. There's additional ways you can call it, so you don't have to do it this way. You can actually create a JavaScript that will use an AJAX function to run through a PHP array that we're getting up here. And there's a whole bunch of ways that you can set this to be displayed, but for this tutorial we're just going to go over the basics of getting it to display using a for each loop. In the next tutorial we may go over integrating AJAX into it so you can pull from it, you can edit, you can update all without kind of leaving the page. So let's go ahead, and I want to add the information here that would allow us to delete or edit each one of these records based on this ID. Because if you remember in the last episode we had an update where the ID of 1 would display the record that we can update. Same thing with delete. So what we want to do is give an easy way without having to remember the ID and type in the .php, and we can do that from here. So on our code over here we're going to let's go ahead and do table class equals text right, which is a function or a class of Bootstrap, and it's going to align that text to the right. So let me bring this over a little bit so you can see it a little better, and then we're going to create a link that replicates what we just did manually with the update.php page. So let's go ahead and do this, and we're going to name this one update. And inside of this I'm going to copy over this real quick, and because we're going to be using that ID, so we're going to do /update ID equals employee ID. So we can also take this and bring it down, and now we can change this from update to delete, and we can also change this to delete. So now if we go back to our page, refresh, we now have an update and a delete button. So if I click on update, we're going to be able to update Jane Doe. If we click on update for John, it now says John Doe. So we've essentially created a table of records that we can reference very easily. If there's 1,000 records in here, it's only going to show the first 10 unless we tell it to show all of them, or you can set it to show 50 or 100 or 1,000, whatever you want to do. So this is kind of how we incorporated the data tables to make it a lot easier to be able to visually represent our data. Okay, so there's a few things I want to do. I didn't click on delete because I don't want to delete these right now. So what I can't do from here is add a new record. So what I want to do is to be able to create a header using Bootstrap that will allow me to add a new record to this table using the insert.php or create.php that we created in the last episode. So I also want to create another theme folder, our theme file, that's going to be called header.php. And this is going to be inserted, let's just say about right here, because we're going to have the navigation that controls the insert, log in, log out whenever we get to that functionality. Right now, we're just going to, I don't even think I want to include it in here. Right now, we're just going to include a reference to it. Let me take it back a little bit. So I'm going to not put it inside the container fluid because sometimes your header stretches further than your content does. So in the case of this, we're actually going to add a container fluid inside of the header.php that we created. But for right now, let's go ahead and include our theme /header.php. And now we already created our file over here, so if we refresh the page, nothing's going to happen because we haven't added anything to it. So if we go to header.php, and we can go in here and add information to it. So there was a function that we used on this page initially in the first episode that was like the select all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this, but it's not going to be the select all, it's going to be the select single, just to kind of simulate a user that's logged into the system. We don't have a login screen currently. We can add one of those later, but for right now we're just going to simulate that this information is being gathered whenever they log in. And I just realized I spelled employees wrong, so I'll fix that in just a second as well. Let's go back over here and do all employees the way that it should be. Alright, so now we're gathering the user with the user ID of 1, which will return John Doe. So we want to create a welcome message. So welcome equals welcome / welcome comma user fname, and then we're going to add a space in between these two, and we're going to do user lname, and that's going to give us the welcome message that we want to display on this page. So let's go ahead and go into the header, and we're going to add our div class equals container -fluid. That way it stretches across with the content. If we limit the content size, we can also limit the header size. If we, in the future, if we choose to have the header go all the way across and the content be contained, we can just remove this class. But for now, we're going to use it. So also with Bootstrap, it comes with a really cool column structure system. So if you think about a website, think about it in 12 different columns. So let's say on this page, if we wanted to have a div that spanned across all 12 columns, we would do in a Bootstrap class of column-12. If we wanted to have something where it was a div that extended all the way across to the middle, we would do column-6 because 6 is half of 12. Same thing if we wanted to do a third, a third, and a third, we would do column-4, 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 and that'll present us with 3 columns to put in our content. And you can use the numbers in any way that you want to, so we can have 4 on this side and then 8 on this side, as long as they equal to 12, because 4 plus 8 equals 12. So for our header, we're going to split it up to pretend that we have a logo. So let's say we have our div class equals row. So the row is what contains those columns, and you have to have a row with the columns or else the columns won't work. The row basically just tells it that we're going, anything contained inside of this div is considered a column. So we got our first class created, which is row. The next class we're going to do is class equals column. I'm not going to add a number to this one because I don't technically know what it is right now. And this is where we would have like a logo. So we're just going to put logo here. And then we're going to close out our column. And then we're going to close out our row. So now we want to be able to display our navigation. And our navigation can be pulled from a database. It can be pulled from anywhere. We're going to manually code it for this purpose. So we're going to create another div. And we're going to do column dash medium, which is a medium device, which is basically a horizontal tablet and up. If anything below a horizontal tablet will display at a column 12. If you wanted to change that, so let me go ahead and do this. So column MD-8, but if you wanted to make it where a mobile does 6, you would do column dash SM-6. Or you can just do column dash 6 and it'll display everything prior to a vertical tablet would display at 6 rather than 8. So for right now we're just going to default it to 12 and use the 8, which would make this column go to 4 because 4 plus 8 equals 12. So we don't have to declare this one because we didn't know what it was, but we know we want this one to span the majority of the screen, and we're going to make it where this column on tablets and above display at 8 columns, and this one displays at 4 columns. Anything below that, they'll both default to 12, so you'd have your logo above whatever we're fixing to put inside of here. Alright, so let's go ahead and close this off. And we're going to add a nav tag, and then inside of the nav tag we're going to do a UL, which stands for unordered list. If we wanted to do an ordered list, we would do an OL, which would display numbers. This one would display dots, which we will handle through our own CSS. So let's go ahead and add a href equals slash just to be able to bring them back to the home page, which we're going to call dashboard. Alright, so we got our first list item, and let's go ahead and close out our list and close out our nav. So if we go back to our site and we refresh it, we'll see that we have logo here with dashboard where it's not lining up where we want it to go. We want it to actually be lined up over here. So inside of this we're going to use that text-right class again in order for it to move that text to the right. There's still some wonkiness going on with these dots, which is part of the list item. So we'll handle that in just a second, but what I want to do right now is create additional links. So we have a dashboard link. We want it to have a create new link, and then we're also going to display this welcome message that we have at the top. So for the welcome message, we don't need to have a link, so we're just going to do PHP echo welcome because that is what we called it at the top. On this one, we're going to do /insert because we have our insert.php. Nope, it's not insert, it's create. I keep saying insert. So create because it's part of the CRUD system. CRUD for create. Alright, so we're going to title this one create new. Now if we refresh our page here, still isn't pretty, but we're working on that. So if we go to click on create new, it brings us to the insert page. Same thing with the dashboard, it just brings us back to the home, and then this brings us to the update.php, but we can't currently get back unless we hit the back button. So what I want to do here is take this code that we just edited and add it to the other pages the same way we did the script. So if we go back to our index, we're going to copy this, and for right now we're just going to add it to the update.php page. And we can do it outside of our update our user false because it's going to be displayed whether they are there's an action or not. So let's go ahead and go back to our update, and you can see that now that we've included this, it's included on that update.php folder or file. Alright, so now let's go in here and make this a little bit prettier. So I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it CSS. So inside my CSS folder, I'm going to create a new file called style.css. I just do something that makes it prettier for me. You don't have to do this, but in my body tag, I like to make my color 333 just because it kind of gives it's an off black, so it's not fully black, it's not like popping out at you black, but it's still dark. So that's a personal preference of mine. You definitely don't have to do it, and I'm going to go ahead and set my font size to 18 pixels. That way we can use REMs later. We're just setting the default body font right now. So 18 pixels I would say is probably the new standard. I remember when I first started it was 14 pixels because everybody's screens were huge. Actually they were very small, but they were blown up. You know, you could see everything on the site with it being on a very small monitor. Now you have very large monitors and you don't want to limit it to 14 pixels because then it may throw off something where they can't read it. So let's go ahead and set our default to 18 pixels, and then we're going to come in here and we're going to modify that nav that we created. So we didn't call it anything, we didn't add a class, so we're just going to do nav ul, and we don't want to have any padding or margin around our ul, so we're just going to do padding 0, margin 0, and then we're also going to do nav ul li in order to change the way that list is displayed. So we're going to do list style type equals none, and this will remove the dots that are next to it. But now we also want to display them where they're next to each other instead of underneath each other. So we're going to do display inline dash block, and then finally we're going to add some spacing. Whenever we line them up, we don't want them to button right up against each other, so we're going to add a margin on the left side only, that way that it aligns flush on the right side for the far right navigation item, but it gives a spacing between each list item going towards the left. So we're going to add 2 rem here, which will basically take this 18 pixels and double it. Alright, so now let's go back over here and do well, I got to call the style sheet. So let's go back to our header scripts, and we're going to copy this last one, and we're going to change it to go to /css/style.css. And always have your style sheet called after everything else, because if our style sheet is called before the style sheet for Bootstrap, then Bootstrap's going to overwrite our styles. If you call yours last, then this will make it where your style sheet can overwrite some of the defaults of Bootstrap or DataTables and stuff like this. So for right now, we're just going to call it after it, and we're going to use the /css for the same reason I told you earlier to use the /js. But this time it's actually in a folder. Alright, so now we do a refresh. You can see that now these are aligned properly. It's lining up to the right like it should be. It's got the create new and a dashboard. So let's go back to our update, and everything over here is updated because of how we included our header script. Alright, so that is actually, you know what, I want to do something else to the styles, because the header tag is butting right up against everything, and I don't want that. So I'm going to take this and change it up a little bit. So I'm going to come in here and do h1, we're going to do margin dash bottom, and we're going to give it that same spacing that we did for our list items on the left. And then I also want to add header, which is what we wrapped our header in, wrapped it around the nav and the logo. So we're going to do header, and we're going to do margin dash bottom, and we're going to make this one, I don't know, let's do 1 rem. Okay, so if we refresh it now, we have a spacing here. Still not liking the spacing between the header and the logo, so let's see what this one looks like with the 2 rem. Did I wrap it in a header? I did. Oh, I didn't close out the header. That would be why. I didn't close out the div either. That's my bad. So we close out the div, close out the header. Wow. Okay, now it gave us too much space. So let's come back and do what we were initially going to do with the 1 rem, and yeah, that looks good. So if we go to update, well, yeah, that's because we don't have our, we're not wrapping this up, but you can still see that the spacing between the header and between the update to the content is it's lining up with how we're doing it in the other places as well. So let's open up, we already got our data tables, we don't need that. We got our Bootstrap for now, we don't need this either. So let's go to FontAwesome, and then we're going to browse the icons. So let's look at the icons here. So we have a few different icons. So for the home page, we did a checkbox. For the update, maybe we want to do something like a plus. For the delete, maybe we want to, well, the delete doesn't have a page, but maybe for an icon for the items that are contained inside of our table, we can do an X instead of a delete word. So there's a bunch of cool things that we can do with it. So we'll come back to this in just a second. But what we need to do is to make these pages actually look a lot better by using Bootstrap elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my update.php. We're including our header scripts, we're including our header, so that's all good. Let's say we want to have our update, we want to have it to be something like a pin. So let's do em class equals, and let's go ahead and change that. And let's go over to FontAwesome and say we want a pen or a pencil. So we got a pen, so that's good. Let's come over here and we're going to do fa-pen. So let's go back to our update.php and refresh, and you see that there is a pen that is there now. Not the prettiest thing. I don't think there is a pen dash circle, so I guess we can check that out over here. So it doesn't look like there's a circle version of the pen, so maybe we can find a better icon later, like this one, pen dash square. Looks like it would be pretty good, so let's do pen dash square. And then refresh, and now we have a square icon. May not blend in that well with our other, but we'll play around with it and see. Alright, so first thing I need to do is wrap this information in this container fluid, just like I did the other one. Div class container dash fluid, and then let's come over here and move you over, and then close out our div. So that'll give us that spacing that we need so that it lines up with everything else. So Bootstrap also has this really cool instructions for what it has, so you can check on the layout, the content, and we're actually going to use the components right now because we're going to be using forms. So their forms, there's a lot of versatility with their forms. They do all kinds of really cool stuff. So you can make it large, you can make it small, default size, you can make it left to right. You can, there's a lot of really cool stuff if you include the JavaScript, but we're going to stick to the default, which is just the form group. Not form group, we're going to actually just be using form control. So let's come over here to our code, and we're going to add the class form control to each one of these form elements. So we've got our name, our ID, name is ID, and then we're going to do class equals form dash control. And I'll show you what this one looks like before I add the rest of them. So it just makes it prettier. Oh, I did that on the hidden one, so that's why that didn't show up. So let's take this and move it down to our F name. Now we refresh. It shows it a lot prettier. Alright, so what I want to do is not have them stretch all the way across the screen like you see right now, but I want to have first name and last name grouped together, and then underneath that I want to have the phone number stretch all the way across. So what I'm going to do in the code over here is I'm going to wrap it in a row and a column like we did previously. So let's go to this one, and we're going to do div class equals row, then div class equals column dash md dash 6. So that's essentially going to put it in 6 out of 12 columns, and we're going to go ahead and keep the break tag in there. Just we don't want them when it goes to mobile, they're going to be stacked on top of each other. So we don't want them to be right on top of each other. We want to have a space in between it, so we're going to leave the break tag right there. So let's go ahead and close out our div here, and then do another div class equals column dash md dash 6, And I declared both of them right now just as an illustrative purpose. You don't have to. You can do it the same way I did with the navigation at the top, but it's not necessary to do it the way that I did it. I just think it's a lot clearer whenever you go to look at it. Okay, so now we refresh, and we have it inner columns now, and we need to do the class name for the field itself. Let me see if I can resize this a little bit. Okay, that'll work for now. So we're going to add this to all three of our elements for now, so we don't have to go back and forth on it. So refresh, and now you can kind of see it's getting that look that we want it to have. Okay, so let's open this back up, and I'm going to scroll over again. So we also want to have our telephone number displayed in a row, and we're going to leave this one the same, the column MD6, that way that the first name and the last name, they're the same size as the telephone number input. And let's refresh that, so now we have this look. So we have our button down here. The Bootstrap Forms has a lot of really cool looking buttons as well, so you can click on buttons and you have all of these options. So success, primary, secondary, danger, warning. So we're going to go ahead and set this one as the primary, which is a class of BTN, which just stands for button. So all of your buttons will start with this, and then you're going to do DTN dash primary. And if we go back to our screen over here and refresh, you see that it updated to make it look like the Bootstrap primary. Same thing if you come over here and you do success. Now the button's going to turn green. Okay. Alright, so we're going to leave it as BTN-primary. So we have our blue button. And let's go back to our dashboard. With this, we want to make it where people know that this is a bad action if they click on it. It's something that they can't come back from because we haven't created anything that saves this record in a temporary database. So we want to make sure that they know that this is something that there is a danger related to it. So let's go back over to our index.php, and on this delete, we're going to, now that we know we have a button dash danger, we also have a class equals text dash danger. And that's going to make this text turn red for us. That way they know this is something bad that's going to happen. But let's take it a step further. So let's say if someone is not seeing that as something that it's warning, it's not enough warning if it's just red. So what if we come over here and we're going to do some basic JavaScript right now. So we're going to do onClick. And you can create this in a jQuery initialize.js like we did for the other stuff, but for right now I'm just going to hard code this into this, where we're going to make it where it pops up with a notification asking them, are you sure, before they delete it with an OK or a cancel. They click OK, it deletes. If they click cancel, it does nothing. So let's do onClick, and we're going to return confirm, which is a JavaScript function to basically show a pop-up message with the OK and cancel buttons. And we're going to, let's go ahead and close this out, and we're going to ask them, are you sure? So what you would typically do in your JavaScript is type in single quote, are you sure, in single quote. However, since we have this wrapped in a PHP tag using the single quote, we need to exit out of this single quote. So we put a slash in front of it. That way that it doesn't run it as PHP code. It essentially just converts it to the string that we're wanting. Alright, so let's go ahead and save this and refresh this. And hopefully, because I don't want to lose Jane Doe, if we click on this, it should now show a pop-up message letting us know to confirm or cancel. So we hit delete, and it says, are you sure? Okay or cancel. So if I hit OK right now, it's going to delete Jane Doe. If I hit cancel, nothing happens. So let me put a question mark at the end of this because we are technically asking them a question. And you can put in whatever you want to here. So you can say, are you sure you want to delete this record? And if we go to refresh it again over here, now it says, are you sure you want to delete this record? Okay or cancel. So let's go ahead and cancel that because we don't want to delete anything yet until we create a new item. Alright, so we have our updated, but if we come over here and we go to that create new, it still looks the same as it did before because we're not including anything in it. So we're going to go ahead and open up our index or our create.php, and let's see, none of this needs to change except for this part. So I'm going to go back to my index.php, or let's go to the update, and we're going to include this inside of our body, so that way that it shows that header file. And then we're going to go back over here and we're going to include the header scripts and the footer scripts. And down here, same thing, except for this is going to now be footer. Alright, so now if we go back and refresh this page, everything is there. It's got the new updated look to it. We just got to make it look better. So we're going to again wrap this in a div class equals container dash fluid, and go ahead and wrap our entire form in it. And then I'm gonna come over here just to quickly grab there we go. I'm gonna go over here and quickly grab this. So this is the same thing that we're using on the create, it just doesn't populate the values. So I'm going to take this and paste it in so that it actually sets it up just like our update, and then I'm going to go in here and remove those fields for the values. We just want to have blank values here because we're not returning anything on the insert page. So now if we go over here to refresh it, it looks just like it does on the update. So we're also going to set our button down here to be btn primary equals btn dash primary, so that way that it looks similar to the update page, so they look the same. So let's go over here and create a new one. We're going to create a test person with the phone number 123-456-7890, and we're going to insert that record. And it added John Doe. So let's log back into here, see what it did. Test person. So is it not redirecting to the right? Update. Where's my functions? Include functions, insert statement. That's weird. Don't know why it updated to John Doe. I wonder if we're displaying inside of this, we're echoing out fname. Oh, okay, I understand what's going on now. So in our header.php up here, we created this user, and inside of our update.php, we're actually basically recreating this user again here. So what I'm going to do inside of our header.php, I'm going to say this is how about login user. That way that it differentiates itself from the other call that we're making on the edit screen. So now if we refresh this, it shows the correct information. So let's go back to our dashboard, and we can see test person with the phone number we just entered, and we're going to go ahead and click delete and OK, which now you can see it deletes it in real time because our PHP for the delete actually redirects us back to this home page. So we got our update record here with the icon, and so we need to do something similar with our create. So for our create, let's do something like a plus symbol. So let's do em class equals fa, and then I believe fa dash plus dash circle will give us that circle with a plus inside of it. But before I refresh this, I'm going to show you how I got that. So over here you can do plus, and now we have a plus. We also have a plus circle. So I know that this exists because I've used it plenty of times in the past. So now we have our insert statement with a plus symbol on it. So let's see, what else do we want to do to make it a little more pretty? So how about we change these to their icons that are represented inside of the using FontAwesome icons. So let's come over here, and instead of saying update, we're just going to do em class equals fa-pin-square, because that is what we used on the previous page. So if we refresh it now, there's an update icon here. And actually, I don't like the way that it looks. It's a little too small. So with FontAwesome, which you can also see in their documentation of how to create this documentation here, with the FontAwesome, you can increase the size of it. So let's do I think it's FA-2x. That'll make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So that's a lot easier for them to understand that this is an edit. So we're going to do the same thing on this one. So em class equals, and I don't know what it is. I believe it's the times word, but let's go ahead and search for it over here. Delete. So we can do a trash can, do a minus symbol. I don't see the one that I'm trying to go for. So if we do times, there's an X. So I kind of like the X, but I also like the trash can. So let's do trash. And that's the icon name. So FA-trash, FA-2x. And this will give us a 2x size trash can that is red. Okay, so that's pretty easy for them to understand. It's a personal preference. You don't have to do it this way. You can do the text if that makes it easier. In this instance, I would probably put a legend up here that represents what these actually mean. For purposes of ADA compliance, you might want to put something in here that says, let's see, like title equals edit this record, and then down here your title equals delete this record. That way that people with screen readers can also understand what they're doing. So if you hover over it, it says edit this record, delete this record. Okay, so right now we have the edit screen using Bootstrap, we have the create screen using Bootstrap, and our dashboard using Bootstrap. Let's see. I think that for now that may be all that we want to do to it. I'm looking through some of my reference code that I've created prior to see if there's anything else that maybe I included in here as a extra. So FontAwesome, Bootstrap. Alright, so I think that is about it. We've been recording for 58 minutes, which is a very long time. A lot longer than I thought it was going to be. So I think right now I'm going to go ahead and end this video. In one of our next videos, I'm hoping to take what we've currently done and still continue to make it look a little bit prettier, start working on the actual mobile responsiveness of it, and start getting into our own styling rather than using Bootstrap styles. We may also throw in some of the Ajax update functionality. The get functionality for DataTables using Ajax is really cool. It's very simple to set up. So I think for now that's going to be it. If you like this video, or if you if you're wondering where this video came from, there's actually this is part 2 of a series. You can visit part 1 in the cards that are going to be displaying in the video now. Just like and subscribe to get future updates, and we'll see you soon.